Hello and welcome to our latest Stitcher Premium episode of Sitting Down with Dr. Dan. We love having you as premium subscribers coming to listen to the show once a month, exclusive for you only. Remember to keep emailing your questions for me to podcast@drdanpeters.com. We read every single question, and we might even answer yours on a future episode. We hope we do. I am happy to be sitting down with our amazing audio engineer and dad, Phil Rossi. Hey, Phil.
Happy holidays, Dr. Dan. It seems like we were just recording the November episode, and here we are in December, fast approaching the new year. I don't know where the time went.
It's flying. It's flying. It keeps moving.
It keeps moving. So we have received questions for this month's premium episode via Instagram and email. So without further ado, let's dive right into it.
All righty.
The first question is a delicate one. It was submitted as a message on Instagram. How do you deal with grandparent advice that is interfering rather than helping?
I've never heard of that happening before.
What is this concept?
Yeah. Oh, man. Okay. So this is very common. So let's normalize this first, right? We have different generations, lived in different times, raised by different types of parents. The world of parenting has changed dramatically over the last several decades. Parenting didn't become a verb, I don't think, until the 1970s. It became a thing. You're parenting. Yeah. And so, okay. So first thing is this happens a lot. And it is a really delicate subject. And let's break it down with the different types of scenarios we can run into. So for example, it can be a grandparent that spends a lot of time with your kids. That's one scenario and is parenting a certain way. It can be a grandparent that only sees the kids on holidays, and so not as much. And so then there's those sort of like those situations that are uncomfortable around family holidays or visits. And then there's also the situation that runs through both of these, which is advice you are getting about your parenting from your parent, which might not feel good or you might not agree with. So in these scenarios, ideally, we're taking a step back and we're saying, okay, what is not working for me? So it's easy to be triggered. I think sometimes we have to actually think about, like, is this actually very unhelpful advice? Is this really impacting my child? And or is this a trigger for me as the child to my parent? And is the advice helpful and triggering to me? Or it's like triggering and completely unhelpful? Because, on our show, we're talking about awareness, Phil, all the time.
Yeah.
We have to take a step back and see, okay, is it helpful? Is it not helpful? Why is it triggering me? Sometimes it just might be really discongruous with your values and beliefs, and other times, again, it hits a chord. So it's always best to talk directly to the source. I know that can be intimidating. It can increase conflict. Is to try to find a way to talk to your parent about your appreciation for their help and their advice, and talk a little bit about your values, a little bit about why you are doing what you're doing, and trying to be transparent and honest. Because the other thing is, a lot of times grandparents also aren't aware, unless they're caretaking regularly, the day-to-day life of your child and that child's development and challenge. So I have more to say, but Phil, I'm you see you nodding your head a lot, and what's going to you?
I think that all makes absolute sense. I think also it could go a long way to diffusing a potential conflict if you also acknowledge your parents' years of experience being your parent. And I think by acknowledging that, they'll feel heard, and they won't think that you're just disagreeing with them because you're their kid and you're going
Right.
to do what you want to do. So I think
Yeah.
acknowledging those years of experience, showing on some level the appreciation that they're invested enough in their grandkids to offer that advice, I think can also diffuse some of that conflict. Because I think that's where some of the anxiety comes from
Right.
with receiving this parenting advice, or in particular advice that, as you said, is incongruous with perhaps what your sort of pillars of parenting are. That anxiety of having that conversation devolve into conflict, and
Yeah.
that's enough to be a trigger right there.
Oh, it is. And as you're talking, I'm thinking about, the continuum of parents that are really involved and maybe sometimes feel over involved. And then there's also the situations where um, your parents are doing to your kids and suggesting they you do to your kids things that did not work for you at all.
Mhm.
Like, let's say, you just need to get tough with him or her. You just need to punish them. They just need to buck up. You need to stop always saving them. How are they going to make it in the world if you keep blah, 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 blah? So there's some things that certainly are just not going to work at all. And there might be really tough conversations.
Yeah.
We don't want extra conflict with our parents if we can avoid it. But there might be some tough conversations of which is like, hey, this is why we're doing it this way. And you have to decide if you're really going to take on your parent from your own experience, if you really want to go there, if you feel you need to go there, versus say, no, we're going to do it this way. Now, the next level, if there is a breakdown or you're not getting anywhere, or you child is get older and becoming more and more aware, is trying in an age appropriate way to tell your child, well, Nana and Grandpa, they just do it differently than we do. And you might have to try to explain their
Right.
behavior because sometimes there's a real mismatch, and the child is really confused by the different messages.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. And I think too, you talked about that one example, and then on the flip side of that example is you're disciplining your child in the moment. Maybe they've been disrespectful or something
Hmm.
else, and you're sending one message, and then either the grandparent is saying to the child, "Oh no, don't worry about it. That's okay,"
Right.
or they're saying that directly to you as a parent, and then challenging
Yeah.
your authority in front of your
Right.
kids. But it's all part of that same bigger picture.
That's a really good point.
Yeah, and I think we've said it here before on the show, and I think this is, a perfect example of, in these moments, no matter how hard it is, you have to challenge yourself to respond rather than react to what
Yes.
is happening.
Yes. Well said. We'll say it again. Respond rather than react. And with response usually comes taking some deep breaths, taking a step back, not just stepping into it in the moment if you can help it. And we also, I think the other word to bring into this conversation is boundaries. This is
Yeah,
really about setting appropriate boundaries for yourself and your family if you have a parent which is not really respecting those boundaries. And again, benefit of the doubt, sometimes they just don't know. They're just trying to
right.
be helpful. So these conversations are really important and preferably not in front of your child.
Yes, absolutely. And I think Dr. Dan, both you and I recognize that what we are offering at it as advice here, it's not easy. It's not going to be easy. It's probably never going to be easy, but these difficult conversations often give you the biggest benefit, the biggest reward.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
stick with it.
Yeah.
You'll get through it.
And you just keep adjusting. And guess what? Holidays are coming. So you're going to have ample time to practice some of this stuff.
That is the truth. Okay, we're going to change gears a little bit, and here is a subject that unfortunately has not gone away, and in fact, in recent months is becoming quite prevalent again. COVID. is not going away anytime soon, and it's taking a toll on our kids. So here's let me say that again because that's not the question. So COVID, it's not going away anytime soon, and it's clear it continues to take a toll on our kids. We had a very important question on this subject come through email from concerned mom, that's in quotes. With more school closings again and more disappointment, I'm afraid my high school daughter is having more than just the pandemic anxiety, depression, disappointment I saw before. What are real signs I should look for, and what are some next steps?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, this is our new normal, and it seems like it's going to be our new normal for a while. To set this in time context, as of this recording, Delta is now an old normal word, part
Right.
of our vocabulary, and our newest word as of really maybe a week ago, maybe 10 days ago, is Omicron. And so who
Yes.
knows what Omicron is going to turn into. But that's a new word. So this continues to go. We know viruses, their job is to mutate. We are hoping this continues to mutate towards the flu, and we have a ways to go. So mental health issues for children and teens continue to be on the rise. It was too high before COVID. It is in some cases doubled with depression and anxiety in the past 2 years. And so we are trying to figure out case by case, person by person, what's a situational depression or anxiety related to COVID, related to isolation, related to lack of activities, lack of connection, and what is a situation where the situational anxiety, depression, distress has sort of moved into a more regular part of one's experience. And
Mhm.
so a few things about that. One is whether it's situational or not, it's still distress, right? I mean, like when we say situation, we're trying to figure out, is this something that's going to go away when the situation goes away? The problem is the situation in many cases is not going away. And in some cases, we get to go to school, now we're not going to school. We get to go to our activities, now we don't get to go to our activities. So I would say we need to take our kids struggling seriously, as concerned mom clearly is. And here are the things to look for. Do we have someone who mood is lower than usual for longer periods of time? Do we have someone who's anxious and worried and doesn't want to go out, doesn't want to see people? And there's a significant difference than this person's normal inclination towards people. Is this person having more stomach aches, having more headaches, having trouble sleeping, having appetite issues, either under eating or eating far more than they usually do? So often that can be a comfort situation for soothing when someone's feeling depressed. Are people saying, I don't feel good, I feel bad, I don't want to live. I don't see the point of life. This is never going to end. Why should I keep going on? Now, there are more and more extreme things that kids are
Right.
saying.
Yeah.
I think in these situations, again, whether it's situational or whether it is moving into something that is more constant, which is happening for so many, it really is helpful to find an outside resource. School counseling, I know, is impacted. You want to see what your school can offer. You look to your community for local licensed counselors, therapists, licensed clinical social workers, psychologists. And now, especially with COVID, there is a number of online therapy apps. We talk about one on the show. Talkspace is one of them,
Right. Yep.
where there's more and more accessibility in modalities that teens are accustomed to through screens, which
Mhm.
sometimes actually helps them drop their guard
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
talk about what's going on with them. So I would say those are the symptoms. But if you guys are seeing any of this in your kids and you can get some other help outside yourself, strongly, strongly, strongly encourage it.
That's great advice. because I think we need to consider COVID, right? You can take COVID and swap it out with some other stress inducing variable, right? COVID will hopefully go away, or we will become accustomed to it. We'll have the right tools to minimize the physical impact, but there will be other stressors in your child's life. And that's where watching for these signs and seeking out the support of experts and having them develop these coping mechanisms is going to be invaluable just in their whole life journey, where
Yes.
they are. We can always come back to the awareness pillar of this show, but it is having those tools within you, knowing that this is part of. I can manage the self part of this. I can't
Hmm.
manage these external factors. I can manage the self part. And as you said, Dr. Dan, there are so many fantastic resources out there to even coach and guide you as a parent, because valuable work happens in the therapy office, valuable work happens in the school counselor's office, uh, but also valuable work, ongoing work happens at home, and that can't be discredited too. So rather than feel overwhelmed by that concept, feel that empowered that you can also have an impact on this, and there are resources to help you be part of that team. The parent is definitely that integral part of that whole.
Absolutely. And to highlight something you said there, which is really important, is um, counseling is the opportunity to teach coping for all of life's
Mhm.
adversities. And that's how we build resilience. And it's through these most difficult circumstances and when we are struggling the most that we have the greatest opportunity to grow. Our
Yes.
defenses are down, we're feeling vulnerable. And so, if you can present these situations to your kids as opportunities, this is an opportunity to grow, to learn, and to feel better. I added the feel better because you have to hit the thing that the child will actually resonate
Yeah.
with. They don't maybe
Yes.
not want they don't want to grow. They
No.
don't want to become resilient, but they might want to feel better.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. And then just to touch on that too, the adolescent, the child, whatever stage of development they're at, they might not be able to even see past, okay, I might feel better about this, but what if X, Y, or Z happens again? Then I always default to well, you knew that you got through this challenge and you felt better, and you'll make it through the next challenge and you'll feel better. Just remember that you do get through it, you do feel better too. So I think that's
Yeah.
something important to remember too for parents
Hmm.
and their kids, that you
Yeah.
will get through it.
Hmm. I know we got to move on, but there's actually, and what to look for. Concerned moms got me thinking. I just want to add a few more things to the list that we're seeing a lot at our center, and that is trouble with lack of motivation, trouble concentrating, distractibility, and then of course that lethargy and low energy. So
Yep.
those are to add to the previous list.
And then just to ask if you're seeing this as well, I've just read in some places too, changes in personality,
Hmm.
changes in
Hmm.
appearance, drastic style changes, changes in friends group, and things like that. I
Hmm.
believe all to be also signs to be on the lookout for.
Yeah, they can be. I mean, it could be
Hmm.
identity seeking, right? Just like
Yeah, yeah,
this thing isn't working for me, and I'm going to try this on. However, it can be also a sign of struggle with the change.
great. Okay, moving on to question number 3, also submitted via email. What is the best way to deal with my middle school son not being invited to social activities where I know the parents and he used to be close to the kid, but now they don't really hang out? He feels left out. I feel angry if it's a large group with mutual friends because I feel the parents, should make sure my son is included. Help! Exclamation point.
Gosh, another really good and really delicate and really difficult situation. I
Yeah.
think most of us would agree from our own middle school experiences, and also for those of us who have parented middle schoolers. Man, those can be the toughest years. That's these transition years. It's like you go from elementary school where you have your friend group and usually know all the parents. And then not in some cases you go to this larger middle school that feeds with other elementary schools, and so many dynamics start to occur. Um, so many dynamics start to occur. And then when you have a child that's left out or and being isolated, it's really, really tough. And when you're friends with the parents, it is tough to know what to do. Um, and we can go a number of different ways with this. Sometimes, and I know this through lots of different experiences and others' experiences, sometimes the best thing you can do is talk to other parents. Sometimes the worst thing you can do is talk to other parents because you don't know what the parents are going to do with it, and what the other kids will know or not know about it. So I've seen it. So I guess I'm saying this is really a judgment call. If you have a close friend in the friend group, you could have a confidential conversation with them to say, hey, can I just talk to you about something? And really, you're coming as a place of concern and wanting and curiosity to see if you can understand what might be going on, as opposed to coming in and saying, hey, why didn't you invite my kid, or why aren't they inviting my kid? Like, that approach can be really off-putting because there's often a lot of social dynamics at play that you might not be aware of. So our kids, we've been on both sides. And it's just really interesting to be on, it's terrible to be on the side when your child is being excluded. It's also really interested when your child who has been excluded is giving you all the reasons they're going to exclude someone else in the friend group. And sometimes those reasons are really legitimate because that other person has been really mean.
Right.
So,
Right.
and I'm not saying the person who's asking the question, your child isn't at any fault. I'm saying it's really complex. And if you can find a way to gather information with someone you trust, then you can try to figure out how to handle the situation. Do you have private conversations? Do you learn more about your child? Are you able to get some information that could benefit your child? Something that you learn that maybe your child is not aware of. But it's really hard, and I can tell you, it doesn't get easier in terms of getting involved and not getting involved, with the exception of the older your kids get. You generally, unless they're under safety information, you have to do your best to let it play out and find other avenues of support for your kids if they are being ostracized, bullied, and left out of situations. But it's so tough.
Yeah, that's hard. And it's hard to be able to disentangle the emotions as a parent that you're feeling, seeing your child left out, and then approach it logically, non-emotionally, because there's few things more difficult, right, than seeing your kid with hurt feelings,
Yeah.
being left out of their their former friend groups.
Yeah. Yeah. I have a quick story to tell that I sometimes tell as hopefully one of inspiration, that involved my mom and my brother. So I have a younger brother. And so I believe I was probably a junior in high school and he was an eighth grader at the time. And it was towards the end of those years in the spring. And it was the high school carnival, and a really fun time. So I knew that my mom was going to drop off my brother, and at some point I was going to drive him home when the whole thing ended. And so what I later found, what I didn't early on, my brother came in and said, "Hey, can we go home?" I'm like, "What?" It's like, it's been an hour. Like, no, can't go. And then he came up to me again. "Hey, could you take me home?" I'm like, "No, we're going to go later." I had no idea what was going on. Turns out my mom drops him off in the big, huge high school parking lot that he didn't know very well. And she's driving away and she sees the four friends that he was meeting, which were his friends at the time, all ditch him and run away. And he's left in the parking lot all by himself at this huge fair. Now, my mom is a very involved mom, very caring mom, very nurturing mom. And the other reason I tell the story, and I tell her, like, she did the hardest and it turned it out the best thing to do. She said she knew she needed to keep driving because it would almost be worse if she went back and got involved. She did keep driving, and I didn't know this. And so my intervention, which was seemingly very self-absorbed and centered at the time, turned out to be unintentionally helpful as well. In that time, he ended up hanging out with new guys who are still his friends
Oh, wow.
today.
Yeah.
And through that pain and that struggle, he was fortunate. He had to dig deep and make new friends that stuck. And I know with our kids, we've been through situations like that as well. It is so hard in the interim, in the transition. You want to be there for them. They don't really want you to at times. They're not feeling good. So it's like, it's a struggle, but also the story is more like, we also have to look outside of that current situation to see what can come out of this. And is this a sign that maybe we need some other avenues as well?
Yeah. Wow. That's a great story. I can imagine how your mother must have felt driving away. Oh, it breaks my heart a little bit. I got to be honest.
Yeah,
but
I feel it too every time I tell that story.
But I think you also touch on an important aspect of this as well, which certainly directly relates to this question, and it's something that I have to frequently remind myself of. We can't, and nor should we feel responsible for always protecting our children from pain or somehow taking that pain for them, because sadly that of course is part of life, and they're going to have to experience that, and we're not always going to be able to come to the rescue, even though every instinct inside us always screams come to the rescue. Sometimes it's okay, and it's going to be okay.
Yeah. Well said.
Doesn't make it any easier, though.
It does not at all.
Well, Dr. Dan, we've got just a couple minutes left here, but I did want to slide in this last question, and this is from our producer, Laura. Hello, Laura.
Hello, Laura.
Can you just give us a few names, a few sources where you go to for your parenting advice?
Wow, that's a good question. I'm going to tackle that this way because I have to think about names and sources in a second. I have two sources, but I don't know if I'll name names. One of my primary sources is my wife.
Mm-hmm.
We team regularly with our 3 children and have always had to team. And we are united in values, and yet we often have different ideas and rely on each other for feedback on how to handle different situations for different kids. And who runs point for these certain conversations with each child based on our current relationship with the child at that time and the content area.
Right.
So I'd say I feel very fortunate to have a partner in parenting with her, and it's just invaluable. The other person is I have a therapist guide, coach, has lots of different names that I see weekly. And she is invaluable to me on my own growth, my parenting. And I feel fortunate to have had her and another psychologist in my life who recently retired for years. I started seeing him when I was going through a tough time in my late 20s. And as I grew older and had kids, and he became a regular monthly check-in for me for years that I just loved seeing. Loved seeing Steve. So I'm a huge proponent of having a trusted guide and trusted partners out
Yeah.
there. I would say like those are like the main things when I think of parenting. Other than that, I am always looking for the latest in mindfulness,
Yeah.
the latest in brain-based parenting. Dan Siegel, Tina Bryson,
Yes. Fantastic. Fantastic
great
duo.
work, right? They
Yes.
do great work. And I have this whole stack of books right next to me that I. But really,
we'll post
yeah,
a picture on social media.
yeah.
Of the stack.
We'll pull
Yeah.
a few. We'll pull some out.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right, that's where I went with that one.
I like the spin on it, and I think that's for our listeners. Take a moment and really consider how Dr. Dan approached that question, and your best source for advice and inspiration may be sitting next to you on the couch as you're listening to this premium episode. Well, that does it, Dr. Dan. That wraps up yet another premium episode. Why don't you take it home?
All right. Another fun episode, Phil. Always enjoy these.
Absolutely.
We so appreciate all of our premium listeners. We appreciate your 5-star reviews. We appreciate you being a part of the community and sharing this resource with others. Be sure to listen, as you guys do, to our our weekly shows, Parent Footprint with Dr. Dan. These premium shows are monthly, as you know. Follow us at Parent Footprint Podcast on Facebook and Instagram, and on Twitter at Dr. Dan Peters. As always, ask yourself that guiding question: what footprint do you want to leave? This has been a Peters and Rossi production. Parent Footprint with Dr. Dan is produced by Laura Rossi. Our engineer is Phil Rossi. Theme music is Mountain Spring High, composed and performed by Gabriel Lewis. Artwork is by Garrett Ross. Follow us on Instagram and Facebook at Parent Footprint Podcast, and on Twitter at Dr. Dan Peters. If you are an advertiser interested in advertising on our show, go to midroll.com/ads. For more information, go to exactlyrightmedia.com. Listen, subscribe, and leave us a review on Apple Podcasts, Stitcher, or wherever you get your podcasts.